Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Access Me Salon, where I will be exploring thousands of access consciousness classes recorded over the last 30 years. The first recording from 1986 until 2022. Join me and find out who likes what class best. I will be interviewing guests from all over the world, people who came to Access very early and who recently joined. So come and explore the world of Access Me. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Access Me Salon session, this time with a very, very, very special guest, Mrs. Shannon O'Hara.
Thank you, David.
Welcome, Shannon.
Hi.
Shannon, as everybody who knows you knows, you are the daughter of Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness. You grew up with Access. So I am very curious to hear what your favorite Access Consciousness recording, telecall, or class is that you found on the Access Me app.
I was going to say one thing, and I'm still going to say it, but there's another thing about the Access Me app that is really fun in that a lot of the archival material, so we're talking Access in the early days, and, it's so valuable to listen to the way in which the tools were facilitated then, because there's so much stuff that we take for granted today it's actually like broken down, in my opinion, in like much more simplistic, bite-sized, relatable pieces in a lot of ways, like the very foundational tools. It's like the way that Dad used to facilitate and the way that Dane used to facilitate. It, like, the facilitation has changed dramatically over the decades. And I mean, most people wouldn't realize that or even think about it, but I love going back and listening to a lot of that stuff, but also because so much of those classes and so much of that content was so revolutionary and life-changing for me that it's like a walk down powerful memory lane.
So it was probably not easy for you to choose your favorite class, your favorite telecall recording.
No.
Could you actually? Do you have one class that you would like to explore today?
The thing that I would really invite people to check out, if this is relevant for them, is a class called the Gold Club, which is facilitated by both Gary and Dane. And it was a year long, or maybe more. It was, they do a session now called the Creative Edge of Consciousness, but when they started it, it was called the Gold Club. And
so the Gold Club was literally how Creative Edge started. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And in the beginning, obviously, it was called the Gold Club, and every session was dedicated to consciousness around money. And they would have done that when I was 23, 24, right when I was, getting into having to figure out my life with money and starting out. And I had created quite a big debt for myself at that age, which is very easy to do as an American because they'll give you a credit card like as soon as you're born. And I was in a financial hole and really not having a lot of clue on what to do. And I made a commitment to listen to each of those. I would have probably listened to each of those sessions like 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 times, depending on the relevance. And there's 12 sessions in the class. And it was the year that my financial future completely changed. It was the X, Y's, and Z's that I needed, like, deep in my core to learn and to get about money and how energy flows works and how our points of view impact how money works in our lives. I cannot say enough good things. It is really the financial education that, like, everybody should receive in, like, 4th grade, then again in 7th grade, then again in, like, 12th grade. It's like it's foundational, it's simple, it's essential, but it is the building blocks of ease with money.
So for those listeners who have not ever been at an Access class, who are very new and curious about what to explore in all these archived materials, what do you think? What would this Gold Club invite people to? What would be the difference or the uniqueness to any other education around money?
In my opinion, the Gold Club is the genesis of all access money classes. There's a huge curriculum and body of work around money and access. I would say my dad is actually quite a master at teaching money stuff. Thank goodness, because it's an important topic. And for those of us that like don't thrive on reading books about the stock market, like this is really, it's really like the fundamental basics of like money that so few people know. That being said, it's the genesis of it's all the tools and energies that then you go on to learn in a lot more of the other money classes and access, which there are other money courses and access, but this is, in my opinion, this is the godfather of all money courses.
Wow. That sounds amazing. I know I listened to it first when we started Write Riches for You together. And we
Right.
also have this as a prerequisite. When I listened to it first, I got, yep, I totally get that. This is the nuts and bolts. This is the platform you can build a business and your financial future on. Shannon, you started an access business long ago, but you obviously started coming to access classes earlier as the daughter of Gary. Were you excited? Did you come to every class? Were you the rebelling teenager? Do you remember your very first officially recorded access class?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was in the first ever bars class, and I actually remember that. It was when I was 12, and it was in the family converted garage. And the reason I was there was because they like needed extra people. They like needed extra heads. So my dad made me and my sister come out and just like get our bars run. So that was the first class. That was the first ever access class period. And I was there. And then as a teenager, I didn't want to like do the stuff my dad did, you know. But then I turned a lot towards access, sort of like out of it wasn't like I was enthusiastic to do access. I did it because when I was later in my teens, I was severely depressed. And Gary would sort of like trick me into getting my bars run, and like he would talk to me for a few minutes, and then I noticed that like when we were done with the conversation, I couldn't even remember what I had been upset about before we talked. And over time I realized that what the access was, there was something about it that was working. So then I just chose more and more of it from there.
So people who know you, people who come to classes know when you go to the microphone, everyone gets excited because the questions you ask are so relevant for the room, for everything that's going on now. The very first question you ever asked your dad, as this, teenager just finding out that this somehow works. Do you have
Yeah.
any idea what year it was, or where to
I
look that up?
No, I don't know, but I could hypothesize that what I probably was asking him a lot is really early on was like, what's the point of living? Like, why are we here? Like, what are we doing here? And he said to me for years, I'd say like, what's the point? Like, why are we here? And he would say, to get the greatness of embodiment.
Wow.
And it took me like a long time to actually hear him like to get it. And I was like, oh, so it's about like having fun with my body? Like, wow, like that's a totally different point of view to come from with living.
Wow. So it started with embodiment, but later on in your life, you then chose to create an access business, and you started talk to the entities.
Yeah.
Was that a specialty that you took over? Did you create that for those people? I mean, now it's kind of the strongest specialty of access. How did that start? How did you get that off the ground?
Well, I was always one of those kids that heard voices and saw things that other people didn't see. And since Gary was my dad, I was really empowered and supported. Like we talked about ghosts around the dinner table, and that was appropriate conversation in my household. So, I did want to be normal as a teen, and that's where a lot of my depression came due to suppressing myself and judging myself for being me. And then when I started doing more access, especially in my I really chose access in my early 20s, very early, like when I was about 20, 21. And in that choice, I started to access my ability with entities again. I had shut off a lot of it in my teens unsuccessfully because I was such a mess from the suppression of that capacity. But since access gives you more of yourself, what came back was this capacity with entities. And I wasn't very excited about it, but in fact, I was kind of freaked out by it. But Gary was like, look, it's like, he is just so he used to create, I remember going over to his house, and at the time there was this very famous psychic medium in the United States named John Edward. And he was like a medium from Long Island, New York. And he had this TV show like on TV. And Gary would like leave it playing when I'd come over to the house so that I could see that this capacity was a viable profession and I wasn't the only one. And isn't this cool that this exists? And I just decided to say yes to whatever being aware of entities was, even though I had no clue what it was going to become. And then slowly over time, through saying yes and talking to the entities and speaking up and letting people into my world, the curriculum of Talk to the Entities emerged.
Wow. So from that choice to literally create a business until it became this really successful worldwide business, was that an overnight success?
I think it took
Okay,
maybe.
you know, a lot of people complain that they have just a few people in their classes and think it's so hard
Right.
to start. How did you start from a business
Well,
perspective?
I did a lot of 1 to 2 person classes for a lot of years just to even get my own capacities tuned up. And it took maybe 10 years for Talk to the Entities to become like a viable, thriving thing.
Wow.
And I never set out to do business, though. It was always just about accessing more consciousness.
So when people have their own facilitator business and they have 1 or 2 people in their class, we could say, oh, you're just like Shannon when she started.
Well, that would be such an honor. And if, it's like, for me, I had really no other option. Well, it's not that I had no other option. I was in my early 20s, like there was a lot of defining track changes in my early 20s. I think in a lot of people's lives there are. But I also have always really enjoyed exercise and movement, and I became a Pilates instructor. So I was facilitating access, facilitating Talk to the Entities, and being a Pilates instructor. Like the Pilates instructor was like my Clark Kent, like this reality normal person job. And at one point, my dad said something like, yeah, it's so much more important to teach Pilates than to, be the mouthpiece for Talk to the Entities. And it was like, I thought about it and I was like, wow, I get it. Like, it's like I could stay in this safe, predictable job where I have a reliable paycheck and be bored out of my mind, or I could take a gamble on Talk to the Entities where there's nothing guaranteed or certain about how this is going to work. And that's what I chose, and it worked.
Obviously. So as a recommendation for people starting their access business, the tools that you used, did you use the tools to start your business, and what
Yeah,
tools or topics would you
well,
recommend?
that's a huge question. But I would say that in the Gold Club class is much of the essential groundwork for what then creates an environment of any kind of financial endeavor, like a business working. Because if you hate money or have a huge conflict around money, or you have money attached to abuse or control or all sorts of stuff, because that is, people do have money attached to all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with money. It will never be possible for you to have a successful business, for you will always be avoiding receiving money. So it's so important to get clear and clean in your relationship with money, in my opinion, from the get-go. And maybe you get clear and clean on your relationship with money as you go, but one way or the other, you have to include that money, you have to be friends with money for a business to work.
Wow. So Gold Club, I think this is the one class that I will listen to today as well, now that we talked about it. Last question, if there was a second favorite class, the number two that you go, okay, that's the one thing that I would recommend, what would that be? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, there's actually a video in there, and I think it's a talk to the animals video.
Okay, talk to the animals. Interesting.
Yeah, that it's a beautifully made video. First of all, I think it's like 30 minutes. I apologize if I'm not accurate about that, but I'm pretty sure it's a talk to the animals video, and it's very old, and it has my dad in it. It has Susie Godsey, who's a talk to the animals facilitator, and a bunch of horses. And I watched that, and it was like so powerful, the clarity of the information, and just it's so refreshing to like hear that, to see it, and to get it through the context of like cooperation with animals. It's really beautiful.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Shannon O'Hara, for your extrapolation of money, of entities and animals. I am very excited, and I hope that very soon some of my guests will probably choose a Talk to the Animals class to explore more about the topic with animals. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, David.